My name is Bryan Carter. I'm a journalist from Belgium, and I just made my first documentary called Dublin's Trap, which shows another side of the Greek crisis, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Why Greece? Why this topic?
Greece, because I've been going to Greece on a regular basis, about 20 times in the last 5 years. And as I went more, I could really see how the crisis was starting to affect people. But often people would also talk about immigration. And it's true that in some parts of Athens, for example, you really see the presence of illegal immigration on the streets. It's something very visual. You see it, and Greeks often complain about this. So I started looking into it. That's when I realized that, we always heard about Spain and Italy, but it's actually Greece in 2010 that became the main point of entry into Europe. 90% of all arrests for legal entry in the European Union were made in Greece in 2010. And this created a sort of, already people were telling me about this Chrysiavi party, which is now in the parliament, that there's been a lot written about since the last elections in May and even now. So I thought, if you're going to have an economic crisis and you're going to have immigration as well, of course, some people, usually on the right-wing side, are going to start pointing fingers. And so I thought that was an interesting subject because, what are we going to do about it? If we have a rise of right-wing extremism, what Europe can do about it. But in order to do the story, I wanted to link it to Belgium. One day I was just reading the newspaper and I found this article about Mohamed Samir Samimi, who sued Belgium and Greece at the European Court of Human Rights and who won because of the Dublin II regulation. And so that's how I knew that I had something that could link the Greek problem to the wider EU problem and say, look, EU is not doing the right thing because one of their policies is to kind of block asylum seekers in Greece because they cannot file an asylum in another country.
Going into details of making this movie, how long did it take you to make this movie?
It took me, 9 months about. 9 or 10 months. But then afterwards, you're never really done. After I always kind of have to work on different things, like sending it to festivals. But the end product basically was ready in November. And I started pitching the idea for the documentary in February because basically the organization that funded the documentary, I had to give in a file, to explain why, to explain the concept and everything in order to get money. So I had to hand this by March 15th. Before that, I worked on it, doing some research and everything. I sent the file to them. It got accepted, and then I started working on the pre-productions, organizing interviews, organizing the shooting and everything. The shooting itself was 3 weeks, and then the editing process took 3 months.
Do you know how many hours of material you shoot?
We had about, I think we had 25 hours of material.
Oh, this is not that
No.
much for the movie like that, I think.
Wait, I'm trying to think. Was it 25 or 50? I think it was 25.
Yeah, but your experience, so probably you perfectly knew what you want to get.
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's true we did it, I think, because now, I didn't know anything about documentaries before I did this. I kind of went there, did it the way I thought, but not really knowing much. And, as I talked to others, I realized that often people spend a lot more time on it. And ours was done quite quickly. But also, on those 25 hours, there's a lot of hours that are completely useless. I think that my mistake from the beginning is that I wanted to show everything. I didn't narrow my scope enough. So now looking back, I think we could have spent more time on some issues, on some things that we're saying on the documentary, and others which, we had whole days of shooting, which you don't see a single minute or a single second in the documentary. And that's sometimes frustrating because you're like, oh my God, we spend the whole day shooting this in the heat, in July in Greece, and in the end we don't use any of it, Perhaps I should have spent more time with my main characters, getting to know them better to get more out of the interviews, and also some aspects of the documentary perhaps I should have spent more time on.
And how did you get to all those people? Was it hard?
The contacts were made prior going to Greece, so just sending emails and making phone calls. What's particular about Greece is that any official that you want to interview, everything, whether it's a local employee from the state to a minister, everything has to go through a special sort of ministry of communications that they have in Greece, and they were very cooperative. So they really helped me in getting the authorizations and in interviewing some people. So they were very helpful. We didn't get everybody we wanted. For example, we wanted to have the interior minister, if you want, the one that's in charge of migrations and police and everything. Instead, we had a spokesperson, which was fine, but we would have preferred having the minister. Others, for example, was pure kind of luck, if you want. The leader of Christiavi, so Golden Dawn, the far-right party that we have, basically we had tried to contact them, by going through their website and sending emails and everything, and they never replied. So what we did, every Monday you have the municipal council, and he's been elected since 2010 at the Municipal Council of Athens. So we just went there, and he comes with his big bodyguards and everything, and we just went up to them, and we're like, look, we're from Belgium, we're doing a documentary on immigration, we'd like to have your point of view. And straight away they said, yeah, okay, and he came out, and we had the interview with him, which was surprising because he usually doesn't really speak to media.
Did you need to get any other permission to film? Because you're filming sometimes in the places near asylum seekers and other institutions.
All these was again with this Ministry of Communication. So they told us, yes, you can go and shoot, but you have to stay on the outside. We never managed to get authorization to shoot inside the detention centers. We wanted to, but we never got the authorization. They hardly ever let cameras go inside. And there was also one time we had an authorization when we were on the island of Lesbos. We had the authorization to go with a boat patrol at night. Oh. Those boat patrols that look for migrants and everything. And that was really hard to organize because they needed insurance and everything. So I had worked a lot on getting this authorization, and 10 minutes before going to the boat, they called me and they said, oh, actually, we're not going out tonight. Sorry. And we had already booked our tickets to leave the island. So we had to use some archive footage that came from the UNHCR instead.
Did any obstacles occurred?
Well, for example, one time we were shooting in Athens in a square, and there was a lot of illegal immigrants. And just then the police arrived and they started arresting them, running after them. And we were right there. So we had all this great footage, basically, of those migrants being arrested by police. But then they saw us and they obliged us to delete it, which was a shame because we didn't have the authorization. And in Greece, if he's legally allowed to ask you to delete it, and if you refuse, you get arrested. So we had to delete it, unfortunately. I mean, the general thing about Greece was two things. First of all, we shot in July, it's extremely hot in Greece. So that was already kind of a hard shooting for that because the temperatures were above 40 degrees and it was kind of complicated. And the other thing that was complicated is that Greeks are very, very suspicious towards media. If you speak to Greeks in general, they'll tell you that, media are all corrupt and they're all controlled and they always say lies and everything. That feeling is very strong in Greece. So when they see a camera, straight away they get a bit suspicious. And many times we had some tensions with some locals who saw us and who came and were like, what are you doing? What do you want? And everything. But fortunately, we had a Greek interpreter with us who managed to calm the situation each time, so it never went out of hand, basically. But that was also difficult. I mean, in Belgium, I've never had a problem. I've been working there for 5 years, and filming in the streets, and I never had a single argument with anyone. But there in Greece, in just 3 weeks, we had a bunch of them. We had a few arguments, so that was a little difficult as well.
What was the most challenging in creating this movie?
I think the most challenging was the scope of it. trying to fit everything in a 50-minute story, where I wanted to explain a lot of things from the entry at the borders to the problems that the migrants face, to the rise of nationalism, to explaining the Dublin regulations. So I think putting all this material together into a sort of linear and explanatory story was the most difficult. I mean, writing the script took me a lot of time because there was a lot of elements. I mean, some elements I had to leave out as well, choosing what to include. But yeah, I think generally it wasn't an easy task to use this Dublin regulation to sort of illustrate the whole problem of Greece. And this movie was more, let's say, destined to be shown to a public that doesn't really know what's going on in Greece. So when it was shown in Greece at the festival, for a lot of Greeks, they already knew some of the things that I was saying. And I wanted to mainly make a movie for people who wouldn't know about the situation in Greece. But yeah, I think that was the most difficult thing, was to really kind of put everything in a 50-minute, all this information into a coherent 50-minute piece.
When I was watching this movie, I was thinking how to stay objective, because it was, for me, it was objective. You as a journalist, you made good work. You didn't judge anyone. I felt like that. So how did you do that?
Well, I mean, like you say, I mean, I'm trying to stay objective, although to some people I wasn't. For example, when it was shown the first time in Greece, at the first screening in Thessaloniki, most of the public was cool, but there was 2 or 3 people that got really offended and who started saying, yeah, you're not objective, you're pro-migrant, you're giving a bad image of Greece and everything. And I mean, the point of view that I take is that of a migrant. So it's easy to say that I'm sympathetic to them. I'm not going to lie, I'm concerned about the situation, but I was trying to stay objective as well. I also say that there is sometimes some problems when you have massive illegal immigration, they have economic difficulties, so there's a rise in criminality. Those things I say, perhaps I don't say enough, and I focus a lot on the rise of nationalism, but I think complete objectivity is very difficult. I think it's objective in the sense that I'm trying to give a voice to everyone, but I think that you do feel that I'm concerned for the situation of migrants. I'm against the Dublin II regulation, and I'm also concerned about the rise of extremism in Greece. So all these things, if you look at it from that angle, you could say I'm not objective. On the other hand, you could say I am, because I'm giving a voice. So I think it really depends on everybody's opinion about the film. I tried to stay as objective as I could, but then again, I think in a movie like that, there will always be some point of view that transpires, but just from the angle you're taking. If your angle is that of a migrant, then it's, people are going to say, oh, well, you're not objective, but you have to choose at some point. Otherwise, it's impossible to build a story.